The star, the world recognized the life she forgot. There was once an evening when Patricia Neal walked onto a stage, and for a fleeting second, it felt as though the entire world paused just to witness her. The spotlight embraced her with an almost reverent glow, capturing the elegance and certainty she carried so naturally. To millions, she was unmistakably that woman gifted, composed, and carved into the memory of Hollywood's golden era. Her face belonged to the public, familiar enough that audiences believed they understood who she truly was. But behind that familiar face lived a truth almost entirely erased. Before the world realized it, Patricia slipped into a silence so deep that even she could not find her way through it. A sudden collapse stole not only her strength, but the very memories that formed the foundation of her identity. Language faded. Recognition fractured. Entire months vanished from her mind, as though someone had swept them away overnight, leaving behind an empty, bewildering space no biography ever captured. The question that echoed unanswered was simple yet haunting. How does a woman return to a life she can no longer remember ever living before the world ever wondered how she found her way back? Patricia Neal had already lived a life that seemed destined for legend. She stepped into the entertainment world with a stillness that drew attention before she even spoke. Her talent arrived fully formed, sharp, expressive, and grounded in an honesty that set her apart from the illusions Hollywood loved to create. Broadway recognized her first, offering the stage that would ignite her rise. Hollywood followed, quickly captivated by an actress who could command a scene with the smallest movement. Her triumph in HUD marked the height of her ascent. The Academy Award she received was not just a prize, it was a declaration that Patricia had become one of the era's defining talents. Audiences admired her strength, directors admired her precision, and critics admired the quiet fire she carried into every performance. For a moment, it seemed as though her path stretched forward without interruption, lit by the promise of even greater roles to come. But beneath the applause and the carefully staged photographs was a weight few ever sensed. Fame wrapped itself around her life, tightening with each success. The demands of her craft, the heartbreaks that filled her private world, and the unspoken grief within her family left cracks that no one could see from afar. The headlines captured the brilliance. They never captured the strain beneath it, because behind all the admiration, something within her was beginning to bend. Patricia Neal's story began far from the glittering cities that would one day call her their own. Growing up in Kentucky, she felt the confines of a world too small for the ambitions quietly forming inside her. Acting for Patricia was not an escape, but a declaration, proof that she could transform the limits around her into something far larger. She pursued the craft with a seriousness uncommon for someone so young, studying every movement, every voice, every possibility the stage offered. When she reached New York, the city greeted her not with open doors, but with relentless tests. Casting rooms were crowded, opportunities thin, and expectations unforgiving. Yet Patricia did not fracture under pressure. She sharpened. Each setback tightened her resolve, and each minor success hinted at the brilliance waiting beneath her discipline. Broadway eventually took notice, recognizing in her a rare blend of emotional precision and natural presence. Hollywood's call followed, bringing roles that allowed her to reveal the depth she had been cultivating for years. Her performances were striking not for their loudness, but for their truthfulness. She conveyed longing, conflict, and strength without needing to force any of it. But even in this ascent, shadows gathered around her. Her intense, complicated involvement with Gary Cooper left marks she rarely spoke of, scars that shaped her understanding of love, ambition, and vulnerability. Every chapter of her rise was built upon resilience. She was not merely climbing, she was carving her way upward, redefining herself with every role she embraced. Patricia was becoming more than a performer, she was becoming someone unforgettable. As Patricia Neal's place in Hollywood solidified, the demands placed upon her became increasingly unforgiving. Stardom required a flawless mask, one that concealed exhaustion, fear, and the emotional wounds she carried long before the cameras ever found her. Her elegance on screen made audiences believe she lived a life untouched by turmoil, yet behind that polished image was a woman stretched thin by expectations she could never fully meet. Every role asked for a new piece of her. Every success took something in return. Her marriage to Roald Dahl brought companionship, but it also unfolded within a household marked by relentless strain. The near-fatal accident that injured their son cast a long shadow over their family, altering the emotional rhythm of their lives. Patricia tried to balance the weight of that tragedy with the demands of her rising career, often pushing herself beyond any reasonable limit. Hollywood saw the poised actress who never faltered. No one saw the nights she lay awake, overwhelmed by a kind of grief and responsibility she did not know how to articulate. The world expected her to remain unshaken, but each passing year made that expectation harder to sustain. The pressures of fame, the scrutiny of her past, and the instability of her personal life chipped away at her resilience. She gave everything she had to her work, to her family, to the image the public adored. What she did not realize was how close she was coming to a point of collapse. Behind the shimmering glow of her fame, something inside her was quietly unraveling. It began on a day that should have been filled with tenderness, not terror. After giving birth to her fifth child, Patricia Neal felt an unfamiliar weight coil inside her, subtle at first, then rapidly overwhelming. Within hours, a succession of massive strokes struck her with a force no one expected. The woman who once commanded stages and screens lost her ability to speak, to read, to understand even the simplest pieces of the world around her. Her mind, once so sharp and expressive, had been abruptly severed from the life she knew. Doctors delivered their verdicts with a finality that felt like closing a book. Patricia would not recover. They believed her talents were gone, her identity fractured beyond repair, her future erased. Hollywood echoed those predictions in hushed tones, quietly shifting its gaze to other rising stars. To the public, it seemed Patricia's story had reached its tragic conclusion, a brilliant life extinguished without warning. But inside her home, Roald Dahl refused to accept the ending laid before them. He created an unorthodox rehabilitation regimen, one born from fierce love and equally fierce determination. His methods were relentless, demanding, and unlike anything the medical community endorsed. He pushed Patricia through hours of exercises designed to force her mind to rebuild itself, repeating actions and words long after exhaustion set in. Some found his approach harsh, others saw in it a desperate act of devotion. For Patricia, trapped in a fog she could not explain, his insistence became the single thread connecting her to the possibility of return. Her fall was not simply the loss of memory, it was the dismantling of identity, the erasure of a life lived brightly and boldly. And yet, somewhere inside that silence, the fight to reclaim herself had already begun. Her return began not with applause, but with the smallest flickers of recognition, moments so subtle that only those closest to her could see their significance. A hesitant word, a phrase formed after several attempts, a step taken with caution, then another with slightly more confidence. Recovery did not sweep in like a miracle. It crept forward, fragile and uncertain, rebuilding Patricia's world one fragile fragment at a time. Language, once her most powerful instrument, returned slowly. She relearned the cadence of speech and the structure of thought, piecing together abilities that had once flowed from her effortlessly. Yet even as she reclaimed parts of herself, there remained stretches of time she could never retrieve. Those lost months became a quiet void, an unwritten chapter she chose not to revisit, perhaps because some silences are better left undisturbed. Against every expectation, Patricia walked back into the world that once believed her story had ended. When she returned to acting, she carried with her a depth shaped not by technique, but by survival. Her performances held a new gravity, a stillness born from what she had endured. Audiences felt it immediately, the shift in her presence, the quiet intensity that came from a woman who had crossed a very thin line between life as it was and the uncertain space she had fought her way through. In public appearances, that same quiet strength radiated from her. She moved with a sense of someone who understood life differently, now someone who recognized both its fragility and its profound worth. Patricia Neal did more than recover. She reclaimed the narrative the world had prematurely written for her, choosing instead to write her own continuation. Patricia Neal's legacy settled into the world, not as an echo of her early fame, but as a testament to the depth she uncovered through hardship. She emerged from her ordeal with a presence transformed, calmer, firmer, and quietly radiant. Her later performances carried a raw honesty that could only come from someone who had stared into a void and returned with a deeper understanding of what it meant to live. Critics noted the shift, audiences felt it instinctively, and colleagues saw in her an artist who had crossed a threshold few could comprehend. Those who worked beside her spoke of her steadiness, a kind of grounded wisdom that made her both a mentor and a mirror. Younger actors admired not just her talent, but the endurance behind it. She embodied the truth that brilliance is not defined by the absence of struggle, but by the courage to continue shaping oneself through it. Her story traveled quietly from set to set, generation to generation, reminding people that reinvention is possible even after life has stripped away what once seemed permanent. Her films, old and new, carried traces of her resilience. Viewers discovered in her performances the fusion of two lives, the woman she had been before the darkness and the woman she became after emerging from it. That duality became her imprint on cinema, a subtle but enduring mark of someone who refused to be reduced to tragedy. Patricia Neal did not leave behind a legacy rooted in sorrow. She left one grounded in renewal, a legacy that whispers, rather than declares, that the human spirit can return from places even memory cannot reach. Patricia Neal's life unfolds like a quiet testament to the truths that fame can never fully reveal. She walked through Hollywood's brightest corridors, earned the industry's greatest honors, and left her mark on some of cinema's most enduring stories. Yet the chapter that defined her was the one written far from the cameras, a chapter carved out of silence, uncertainty, and a struggle few understood. From that silence, she rebuilt herself with a strength that fame had nothing to do with, and adversity had everything to teach. Her journey invites us to reconsider the distance between what we see and what remains hidden. The world admired her elegance, but it was her resilience that shaped her legacy. The woman who returned from a life she could not remember carried with her a kind of light that was softer, steadier, and unmistakably earned. She did not reclaim fame for its own sake. She reclaimed her life one careful step at a time, challenging every expectation the world had placed upon her. Her story lingers not because of the tragedy she endured, but because of the courage with which she rose beyond it. It reminds us that even the brightest stars cast shadows, shadows shaped by battles fought in silence, by memories lost, and by the echoes of a past that refuses to fully fade. What does Patricia Neal's journey leave with you if she were standing before you? Now, what would you want to tell her? Fame and shadows, every star has its story.